I was signing Yasha above Rico from Street Scores, and man, this is big news right here. It's been a lot of major news coming out of the Commander Nation, the Commanders reporters, front office, coaching staff, wherever it's coming from. It just seems like every day there's something new. I mean, I have so many videos I need to work on, and I keep having to push them back because I have to take time out of my day to report everything that's going on in the Commander Nation. And there's a report from a Commander insider and reporter that the Commanders' top offseason priority is offensive line. So of course, you know Rico Street Scores, man. We got to take a look at all of the best free agent options, all of the best draft options that we have. Should we attack free agency very aggressively for offensive linemen, or should we wait for the draft, or should we do both? Should we attack offensive line in the first round in comparison to potentially attacking like corner or linebacker, or maybe even quarterback? And of course, I also want to take a look at a lot of advanced statistics to see if our offensive line truly is that bad. Like, how bad is our offensive line for real? Us as fans feel like it's the worst thing ever, but we got to take a look at and see how we rank in people's opinions, and then also look at some of the facts and some of the statistics and how bad our offensive line has been as well. Is it really necessary for us to prioritize offensive line as our #1 need in the offseason? If you think about it, with Sam Howell being the projected starting QB1, potentially even our franchise quarterback, especially going into this 2023 season at the very least, making sure that offensive line is a top 10 unit does sound like it should be a top priority. But how bad is the offensive line for real? But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately, and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you pull up this Sunday. Every Sunday, at the very least most Sundays, I will live stream after this video is out. For me to live stream, I'm gonna open up the phone lines, do the call-in show for y'all to call in, give your opinions, give your statistics, whatever you want to talk about as far as free agency, draft, Scott Turner getting fired, potential offensive coordinator, Sam Howell is quarterback 1, QB1, franchise quarterback 2023, Rivera possibly getting fired, new owners, whatever you want to talk about. We're going to be watching playoff games together, more than likely this Buffalo Bills Miami Dolphins game, probably stream for like an hour or two today and most weekends, so make sure y'all pull up for that and stay tuned for all of the content, man. Like I said, I have so many videos I need to work on, draft stuff, free agency stuff, film sessions, mock drafts, everything. It's crazy. But without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so this all started when Grant Paulson, who's very close to the organization, has no reason to lie, tweeted out, "Another thing I'm hearing is that the Commanders' top priority this offseason is going to be improving their offensive line. Expect them to spend assets and time bolstering their front as part of the plan that could result in Sam Howell starting next season." So if Sam Howell's your projected starter and you already know who your quarterback's going to be for 2023, whether it's a good option or not, doesn't matter. Regardless, if Sam Howell is your projected QB1 and you're even telling offensive coordinators that Sam Howell will probably be QB1 when you're interviewing for potential offensive coordinators, literally in the interview process telling them, "Hey man, if Sam Howell's our QB1, how would you design a scheme around him and call the plays and things like that and bring the best out of him?" So it pretty much looks like Sam Howell will more than likely, you never know. I mean, of course, maybe a quarterback falls in the draft further than they expect. Maybe a random guy becomes available in free agency or is cheaper in a trade than they expected. But as of today, if we had to play a game tomorrow, Sam Howell would be QB1. I mean, first of all, he's the only quarterback that's technically even on the roster. He's technically QB only, not just QB1. He's the only QB on roster. Carson Wentz is going to get cut, obviously. Taylor Heinicke is an unrestricted free agent. I hope we bring him back as a backup, but only for a certain price. I'm only willing to give him like $3 million or less per year. I'm not about to pay him crazy money. I want whoever we bring in as a backup to Sam Howell be willing to take $3 million per year or less. I don't want to, definitely nothing more than $5 million per year. But either way, if Sam Howell's your QB1, you got that technically figured out. Again, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, we can debate that later. But that part of the checklist is checked off. So now what's next? Make sure you get him weapons. Well, that's already checked off as well. Plenty of weapons, arguably one of the best receiving cores in the NFL. Scott Turner just misused them, and our quarterbacks just couldn't get them the ball even when they were open. And then the offensive line didn't give our quarterbacks enough time to get those guys the ball when they were open and all of that type of stuff. So Scott Turner, quarterback, offensive line, all to blame. Speaking of offensive line, that's that's the next check mark. Is our offensive line ready for a Sam Howell? Well, we could even see in that Cowboys game that they were letting them down left and right at times. But just him being so athletic and being an even better runner than Taylor Heinicke, I feel like him and Taylor Heinicke have the same speed, like straight line. But Sam Howell is definitely more agile and definitely stronger, as we can see on that touchdown run he had against the Cowboys. But still, at the end of the day, as far as him trying to sit in the pocket and scan the field, the offensive line wasn't holding up as well as you'd hope. And we're going to dive into a lot of the advanced statistics, especially Samuel Cosmi and how bad he got beat by Micah Parsons and that Cowboys defensive line. But again, if Sam Howell's your quarterback, you already know who your receivers are, elite. You pretty much already know who your running backs are going to be. So what's next? Get that offensive line right so he can be able to scan the field and make plays and potentially be that franchise quarterback. And again, my point has been, even in other videos, even if Sam Howell doesn't work out, even if he's terrible for some crazy reason, now you're in the position to draft Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Quinn Ewers, or whoever else in the 2024 draft. I mean, who knows? CJ Stroud looks like he may even go back for another year for some weird reason. It's not that serious, bro. Just let my Georgia have it, man. It's not that serious, because I'm not going to lie. CJ Stroud back for another year. I'm worried as a Bulldogs fan. I'm not going to lie. I feel like Georgia's still the better team top to bottom, but CJ Stroud is a problem. And I saw that firsthand in that playoff matchup. But either way, even if Sam Howell's terrible, you have those guys available. And then now, because you spent the entire 2023 offseason drafting free agency, building the offensive line, you're just plopping Caleb Williams or whoever else into an already ready to win right now offense. Hopefully you have a good offensive coordinator. You should have a good offensive line if that's our top offseason priority. And then we already got the receivers. We know that for a fact. Jahan and Terry McLaurin alone are great. And as long as Curtis Samuel, you wrap them up long term in the 2024 free agency, we're good to go. Now, hopefully we still got to figure out tight end a little bit, because I'm not even sure if we're bringing Logan Thomas back. But either way, it makes sense to prioritize offensive line. Just go ahead and focus on that, because even if Sam Howell isn't your guy, as long as the offensive line is great, or at the very least good, or at the very, very least better than what we had this past season, then whoever your franchise quarterback ends up being should be good to go. Now let's take a look at how bad our offensive line truly was. Well, the FootballGuys.com really dive into offensive lines like that's their thing. They do grades, they do a lot of advanced statistics, and they felt like our offensive line was the 16th best in the NFL. I disagree, but for some reason they felt like we had a B overall. We were B+ in run and B- in passing. Now, I definitely agree with the fact that our run blocking was definitely better than our pass blocking, but I feel like it's a bigger gap than that, and I would not rank us 16th. I mean, he has us above the Steelers, the Chargers, the Bengals, the Giants, the Seahawks, the Broncos. Now, I do want to make the point that I don't feel like we had the worst offensive line in the NFL like a lot of people feel like, but I also don't agree with the fact that Football Guys feels like we had the 16th best offensive line. I do not agree with that. And then going on to Pro Football Focus, they have us ranked 20th with their in-season results. Like after week 18 heading into the playoffs, their top offensive lines in the NFL, they have us 20th. They had a 17th before going into the Cowboys game. So apparently Football Guys and Pro Football Focus feel like our offensive line is nowhere near as bad as us fans feel like it is. Again, I'm lower than they are, but I'm also not as low as a lot of fans who think we literally have like a bottom 5 offensive line. Honestly, if our offensive line were healthy, which is, I mean, of course, if was a fifth and all of that type of stuff, but I mean, if Chase Roulier were healthy the entire season, and if we made the decision to move Samuel Cosmi to right guard sooner, maybe start Chris Paul at left guard sooner, I can see how people would think we have a top 15 offensive line. I mean, most of our offensive line problems this year have been injuries, and I also feel like Charles Leno is getting a lot more blame than he deserves. Now, Samuel Cosmi has been terrible at tackle in my opinion, but I think if you move him at guard, we're good to go. I think, in my opinion, a lot of the repairs that a lot of people feel like we need to make for this offensive line going into this 2023 offseason may not be as drastic as I think a lot of people feel out there. Like, I think Charles Leno, ultimately, in my opinion, you move Charles Leno to right tackle, you get your left tackle either in the first round of the draft, and we're going to talk about that later, preferably a Georgia Bulldog. We're going to talk about that though. Or you get a starting left tackle in free agency, which we'll also talk about, who you're probably going to have to pay big money to, so we'll see how that goes. You move Samuel Cosmi to right guard. I think Chris Paul showed enough in that Cowboys game to show that he belongs, and he should at least get the opportunity to start at left guard in training camp and all of that, and I think he'll ultimately win out. And then Chase Roulier, I'm sick of the injury injuries. He's a top 5 center when healthy, but when is he healthy? So I definitely feel like we need to pour some capital into getting a starting center, or at least a really, really good backup. So maybe draft one in like the 2nd or 3rd round, the latest 4th round, or get a guy in free agency that you pay decent money. But I feel like Wes Schweitzer handled his own and looked pretty good as a starting center against the Cowboys. When he was banged up, he didn't look so good earlier in the season, but against the Cowboys, I feel like he did a pretty good job against them. But again, my point is, the way that it's always been for the past few seasons, I feel like Wes Schweitzer is an elite backup, but I don't necessarily want him starting, because if there's an injury to left guard, center, or right guard, and it's not necessarily an indictment to him, it's really more so of a compliment. If we have an injury to any of those positions, I feel like he can fill in quite nicely as long as he's 100% healthy. So I don't want him starting at center, because then if our right guard or our left guard gets hurt, who's going to step in and play for those guys? So I would prefer to go ahead and address the center position and keep Wes Schweitzer as a permanent backup that can fill in on any interior offensive line spot. But the interesting thing about Wes Schweitzer is that he's an unrestricted free agent as of right now. Him and Trey Turner. I don't expect us to bring back Trey Turner. I honestly don't want to, but both of those guys are unrestricted free agents. So we will have to pay Wes Schweitzer to bring them back. And you probably be surprised about how much money Spot Track projects him to get as far as market value goes. I feel like it's definitely more expensive than we'll end up getting. I feel like we'll end up bringing him back for way cheaper than what Spot Track thinks, but who knows? Maybe Spot Track knows something and I don't. But Pro Football Focus, going back, they have us ranked 20th in the NFL. Again, they had us ranked 17th before the Cowboys game. Their notes are: Samuel Cosmi surrendered 4 pressures against Dallas to earn a 24.4 Pro Football Focus pass blocking grade. That's atrocious. And I mean, you can see, a couple of those plays, Sam Howell was running for his life. It was a direct result of Samuel Cosmi getting beat, most notably by Micah Parsons. Also, one really interesting statistic, and this talks about the health problems that we've had this year. 11 different offensive linemen played at least 66 snaps for Washington this season, giving them very little continuity, particularly on the right side of the offensive line. And I would be shocked if any other team has a statistic like that this season. Like I said, I feel like when healthy, our offensive line is nowhere near as bad as people think. But the problem is, we've seen enough with guys getting hurt repeatedly, most notably Chase Roulier, Tyler Larson, a lot of these guys, that we can't depend on them to be healthy at this point. So we need to move forward as if they're hurt, basically, in my opinion, because at this point, we could pretty much just assume that they will get hurt. But I feel like when healthy, our offensive line isn't that bad. But I agree with a lot of y'all out there that feels like, forget when this offensive line is healthy, because when is it healthy? So we need to move forward with that thinking. But that is a crazy statistic. Again, 11 different offensive linemen played at least 66 offensive snaps for the Commanders this season. That is unheard of. That has to be somewhere near a record in NFL history. It just got to be. I can't believe it isn't. And then they talk about who the best player is for each offensive line. They felt like Charles Leno was. Charles Leno is the embodiment of a solid starter in the NFL, but that means that he will lose, and often lose hard, when he runs into elite players, which I definitely agree with. He surrendered 8 sacks this season, but allowed just 37 pressures on 669 pass blocking snaps. So he's pretty solid and usually consistent, but when he goes against guys like Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons, he gets beat. Myles Garrett got him one good time. But generally, as long as he's going against non-elite guys, he's going to hold it down. You can depend on him to hold it down, to handle his own consistently. But when he goes against those elite guys, that's when I'm scared. And that's why I feel like that is the perfect summary of a starting right tackle in the NFL. A good starting right tackle. Move Samuel Cosmi to right guard, move Charles Leno to right tackle, and draft your starting left tackle, or go out and spend crazy money on a starting left tackle in free agency. And again, we're going to take a look at free agents and draft stuff, so don't worry. We're going to get to that. And then before we move on, to really see how bad our offensive line has been this season, which is why a lot of people feel like it is the worst in the NFL, as far as blown blocks go per play, we were the worst in the NFL by far. I mean, look at this graphic, man. As far as pass protections go and blown blocks per play, we were the worst in the NFL by far. It's not even close. It's crazy. This is really, really bad. I don't know how the football guys feel like we only have a B- in pass blocking with a statistic like that, because that's not an opinion. That's a straight fact right there. Now, the x-axis is Pro Football Focus grades. That's opinion. But the y-axis going up and down, where we're the very, very bottom, again, by far, that's pure statistics and fact. And that's just a problem that we got to figure out. Now, moving on, I want to attack free agency first. Let's take a look at what's going on in free agency as far as offensive linemen go. There's a lot of guys out there. I mean, most notably, you have Orlando Brown, a multi-time Pro Bowler, traded by the Ravens to the Chiefs. The Chiefs nor the Browns were able to reach a contract extension extension with him, and then tagging him right now for the Chiefs will cost them $20 million. So how much is he going for in free agency? We'll get to that soon. But you also have Kelvin Beachum, you have Garrett Bradbury, Nate Davis, Andre Dillard, David Edwards, George Fant, Cameron Fleming. I mean, there's so many names. Connor McGovern, Mike McGlinchey. They even have our boy Wes Schweitzer on this list. Isaiah Wynn from the New England Patriots. Whatever we want to do. Because honestly, with the way our offensive line is set up, we can bring an interior offensive line and tackle if we need to. Center, guard, tackle, whatever you want. Whoever's the best at any of the positions, we can get those guys and then plug in Samuel Cosmi and everybody else around that. Worst case scenario, Samuel Cosmi is just starting right tackle for 2023. Really hope that doesn't happen, but that's a thing. Worst case scenario, Charles Leno is your left tackle starting again, but at the very least, maybe you're bringing in elite interior offensive linemen. Or in my preference, you bring in an elite left tackle, move Samuel Cosmi to right guard, move Charles Leno to right tackle, and then bring in an elite center as well, and then our offensive line has the potential to be top 10 in the NFL. Samuel Cosmi at guard has the potential to be a Brandon Sheriff level player, in my opinion. That whole Samuel Cosmi situation was weird. I mean, now that we're talking about it, I think I should bring it up. Samuel Cosmi was asked about like what was going on with you playing guard and tackle, and not even just game to game, but within a game, one drive being a guard, the next drive being a tackle, then going back to guard, and that's just not good for any young development at all. I mean, we brought him in, we admitted that he was a freak athlete, but he was raw. So doing that, first of all, he missed a lot of time his rookie season last year, and then his second season, he missed time, and then when he comes back fairly healthy, not even fully healthy, you're sitting here moving him around like that. That was very strange. And he even talked about it. He said, quote, "To be completely honest, couldn't tell you why," unquote. The team had him rotate at guard and tackle. Quote, "It was definitely a roller coaster. It was a lot of learning this year for sure," unquote. And I mean, shouts out to him for trying to be as positive about it as he could and not throw anybody under the bus. But that is insane how they had him. Let me give you a statistic to show you. This literally makes zero sense. Samuel Cosmi versus the Browns. First drive, 0 snaps. Second drive, 0 snaps. Third drive, 5 snaps at right tackle. Fourth drive, 21 snaps at right guard. Fifth drive, 0 snaps. Sixth drive, 0 snaps. Seventh drive, 9 snaps at right tackle. Eighth drive, 8 snaps at right tackle. Ninth drive, 4 snaps at right tackle. And then 10th drive, 1 snap at right tackle. Like, what is that? How is he supposed to get better under those conditions? What is any of that? Why are you putting him on the field and taking him out? Why are you putting him in at right tackle one drive and then right guard the next? Why is he barely playing? Why is he playing some of a drive and then the rest of the drive not playing? What is going on? Like, what did they honestly expect Samuel Cosmi to be able to even do with that? Of course he looked bad at the end of the season against the Cowboys. He wasn't prepared to look good. First of all, he's still not fully healthy, and I think hopefully over this course of this offseason, he will get fully healthy by the time week 1 comes of the 2023 regular season. But even on top of the health, just mentally, this man is confused and lost. He doesn't know what's going on right now. But moving on, let's go ahead and dive into free agency. Again, I would prefer to get an elite left tackle. Of course, Orlando Brown is the top guy, but at the same time, Spotrac is estimating him to get a potentially $22.4 million per year type of contract for like the next 5 years or something. Now, granted, we're going to get an additional $28 million worth of cap space when we let go of Carson Wentz, $28 million, and I'm pretty sure a lot of that is going to go to Deron Payne, and I hope it does. But we'll still have a lot of cap space left to where if you really do want to go get Orlando Brown, we technically could afford him. And then that's a multi-Pro Bowl left tackle that's only 26 years old. Technically going to be 27 by the time the NFL season starts. But either way, a Pro Bowl level left tackle at 27 years old, that already, I think, skyrockets our offensive line up to top 15 discussions, in my opinion. I mean, Pro Football Focus and Football Guys already feel like they're top 20, top 17, top 16. I feel like Orlando Brown, at the very least, our floor is top 15, with the ceiling of being top 5. Again, especially if you move Samuel Cosmi to right guard. And I think Charles Leno is pretty decent at left tackle. I feel like he'll be pretty good at right tackle. And then from there, I'm really excited about Chris Paul's development because, again, he looked like he belonged against the Cowboys. And then you figure out center. Maybe you go get a guy in free agency. Maybe you go get a guy in the draft. But either way, you plug in Orlando Brown, pay him whatever he wants. Your offensive line is set. Samuel Cosmi has nothing to worry about from his blind side, in my opinion. Then you have Dalton Reisner, the interior offensive lineman from the Broncos. If you want to go that route, he's estimated to get $9.5 million per year. Fairly cheap option. Mike McGlinchey, who's only 28 years old, I feel like a really good tackle in the NFL. Granted, they feel like he's a right tackle, so if you wanted to keep Charles Leno at left tackle, move Samuel Cosmi to right guard, you can go get Mike McGlinchey for a projected $11 million per year, which I think is a good option as well. You have George Fant from the Jets, estimated to only get less than $4 million per year at right tackle. That's interesting. Connor McGovern at center, estimated to get somewhere around $13 million per year from the Jets potentially. Justin Pugh, interior offensive lineman, estimated to get less than $6 million per year, and he's 32 years old. Then you have Isaac Samalo, estimated to get around $12 million per year, interior offensive lineman from the Eagles. Wes Schweitzer, for some reason, they have him estimated to making $14 million per year. It's technically like a career backup, which I think is really interesting. I really want to bring Wes Schweitzer back to be a backup, but we can't pay him $14 million a year to do that. His current salary right now, from his previous contract, he was the 23rd highest paid guard in the NFL, again, even as a backup, which is kind of crazy, making almost $5 million per year, around $4.5 million per year. If we can bring him back for something similar to that, maybe $5 million per year, I would be elated to bring Wes Schweitzer back, in my opinion. Then you also have Isaiah Wynn, who's only 26 years old, from the Patriots, estimated to get almost $16 million per year, which is really interesting. That's my Georgia Bulldog right there too, man. They got him at tackle. Maybe you want to bring him in to be tackle or guard. You have Bradley Bozeman from the Carolina Panthers, 28 years old, estimated to get around $12 million per year. Garrett Bradbury, there goes one of those really good centers out there, estimated to get about $12 million per year. So say you draft a starting left tackle in the first round of the NFL draft, you bring in Garrett Bradbury in the free agency before that to start at center, Samuel Cosme at right guard, Charles Leno at right tackle. I'm very happy with that. There's a lot of ways we could go with this, in my opinion. There's a lot of scenarios. Of course, getting Orlando Brown would be the home run hitter, but at the same time, he's going to be ridiculously expensive. And then before we leave, just to let you know, Trey Turner is estimated to get $2.6 million per year, and I still don't even really want to do that. I mean, only if we're bringing him in for even cheaper than that to basically be a camp body, but I don't even expect him to make the 53-man roster, even if we did bring him back on a really cheap contract. Now, moving on to the draft. Depends on what you like. Of course, I'm going to start with my Georgia Bulldog, Broderick Jones. There's an argument between Broderick Jones and Paris Johnson Jr. from the Buckeyes from Ohio State as to who's the best tackle in this draft. Of course, with me being a Georgia Bulldog, I'm going to be straight up biased with it. I'm starting with Broderick Jones. He'll be my number one tackle right now. Now, granted, I have a lot of film to watch just to give you some names. I already know some of these guys, and I've watched a little bit of tape on some of these guys, but I'm not very familiar with everybody just yet. I haven't gotten to that part of my tape. I've watched a lot of corner, watched a little bit of linebacker, watched a lot of quarterback. I got to get to offensive lineman a little bit more. Watched some, but not enough. But of course, I got Broderick Jones. I mean, basically to compare him to Andrew Thomas, I think Andrew Thomas was the safer prospect, the higher floor. Broderick Jones is more athletic and has the higher ceiling for sure. Broderick Jones has the potential to be the best tackle in this class. And I feel like Paris Johnson Jr. is kind of the same thing as Broderick Jones. Crazy high ceiling. Not a really low floor, not like a project or nothing. They're day one starters, both of them. But they're not as polished as like an Andrew Thomas coming out of college, in my opinion. But both of them relatively high floors. Not the highest floors, relatively high floors, but also very high ceilings to where they could be Pro Bowl, all-pro tackles if they reach their potentials. So I can see an argument to get either one. I would be very happy with either one. Of course, I prefer the Georgia Bulldog, but that's just because he's a Georgia Bulldog. If you take away the jersey, if you take away from where they play, I'm really dead set even on both. Again, I'm going to have to watch more tape to really get an understanding. Then you have Peter Skoronski at tackle as well, who may go in the first round. You have DeJuan Jones from Ohio State as well at tackle, may slip into later in the first round if you want to get a tackle later. Then you have Anton Harrison from Oklahoma at tackle. You have Darnell Wright from the Volunteers at tackle. You may be able to get in the second. There's a lot of names in there, but don't forget my boy Cedric Van Pran, the interior offensive lineman out of Georgia, who I'm really interested in as well. If we can sneak and get him in the second round, if he makes it to the second round, I would be elated. Of course, now my favorite pick in the second round, if he even somehow makes it there, is Darnell Washington. But if he's gone and for any reason Cedric Van Pran is there in the second round, I don't care what you did in free agency. Go ahead and get him, because he could honestly be best player available at that point. But especially if you feel like, all right, let's give Chase Roulier one more year, but let's make sure we get a potential starting center just in case, Cedric Van Pran is perfect for that. So again, I guess best case scenario, you somehow can afford to pay Deron Payne, pay Karen McCurl and Cole Holcomb long term, and then you can still go out there and get Orlando Brown at left tackle long term, and then you draft Cedric Van Pran in the second round and go ahead and spend that first round pick on corner, maybe like a Joey Porter from Penn State, or maybe even a Keely Ringo if that's how you feel. Another Georgia Bulldog. Up to you, man. There's a lot of ways we can go about this where I feel like a lot of them can work out. I don't feel like we're very limited in our options. I feel like we actually have a lot of options, and I'm very optimistic about us figuring out this offensive line situation because we have quite a bit of cap space. And again, I'm going to do an entire video breaking down the cap space and how we can have the most in the NFL heading into the 2023 free agency if we make certain moves and things like that. Make sure you stay tuned for that video as well. But even entering the draft, the fact that we have a first round pick, a second round pick, we gave up our natural third round pick included in that Carson Wentz trade, but we have a third round compensatory pick coming in from Brandon Sheriff, and I'm gonna do a video breaking that down as well, how many compensatory picks we may have for Brandon Sheriff, Tim Settle, and a few others. We may get even more than just that third round compensatory pick that we're gonna get for Brandon Sheriff. So we have a first, a second, and a third, and we can attack offensive linemen in any of those, and I feel like we have some great draft capital and some great free agency capital as far as cap space to be able to address offensive line and give Sam Howell a real fighting chance to be a franchise quarterback this upcoming season. Again, I'm very optimistic about it. I don't know about y'all. Speaking of that, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Are you as optimistic as I am about the Commanders figuring out this offensive line situation in the offseason? Are you happy to hear that Rivera and Martin Mayhew feel like it's the top offseason priority? Do you agree with that assessment as well? And also, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Of course, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you scrolling on the screen right now. Catch y'all later. I'm out.